Hello and welcome to the Android Police podcast. My name is Daniel Bader.
Oh, are we back to doing this now? This has
I'm just
been
trolling you
you're
every week. It
throwing
might be something
curveballs at
different.
me. It's like 6 weeks of not having me introduce myself, and then you're
Is
like,
this does this constitute harassment and or abuse?
everything about this podcast constitutes harassment and abuse.
I think I need to go to therapy and reevaluate my behavior.
Absolutely, you need a vacation. You need to go to a tropical paradise and think about what you've done. Speaking
I'm just looking at you sternly through the internet. Will's in Hawaii, so
yeah,
he can go jump off his very, very beautiful balcony.
I'm on the 5th floor. I don't think I would live. I would be.
Okay,
I'd be not in a good state. I'll tell you that.
You're in Hawaii so that
Yes.
you can cover and report on Qualcomm's announcements. You know,
Yeah.
obviously MediaTek announced the I was going to say the Exynos 9400. That is not what they announced. They announced the Dimensity 9400 last week. This week it's Qualcomm doing its name change again.
Yeah, again, which they didn't want to comment on too much. Yeah, Snapdragon Elite 8 or 8 Elite. It's like X Elite, but which is their laptop chip, but with an 8. Yeah, I have like 100 questions just about the name alone because I am dying to know what their other chips are going to be called now. Like, what is the Snapdragon 7 series? Are we sticking with gens on that, or are we moving to plus 7 plus? What is next year's chip? Is it the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 2? Because that's a mouthful.
Yeah. The 8 Elite Ultra.
Oh my god. Plus.
So let's walk through I think the high level announcement, because I don't think talking about SoCs makes for great radio in general. Like, I've been doing this a long time.
I
I think
agree.
people
Yeah.
generally tune out after 25% increased single threaded performance and 35% increased multi-threaded performance and an NPU that can blah, blah, blah. But I do think this is a big year for Qualcomm in a number of ways, because this is the transition to the same Orion cores that launched with the X Elite series earlier this year on Microsoft's Copilot Plus PC project, which had a huge amount of buy-in from all of the OEMs on the laptop side. And I would say, while the performance per watt was very admirable and a lot of people had a lot of great things to say about the battery life, I also think the reception was more muted than I anticipated, especially after the hype wore down, because so much of what happens on the Windows side requires, I mean, it's so multifaceted, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff that is still not optimized for ARM on Windows, and gaming is still a problem, and the emulation situation is not nearly as straightforward as it was when Apple transitioned from Intel to the M series on ARM, and Rosetta 2 just worked basically. So that is still kind of messy, and we're still waiting on the second gen version to really like ramp up on power. The Snapdragon X Elite was much more about performance per watt and just like enhancing battery life on laptops and doing the same things but getting a lot more battery out of your laptop, right? And I think this story, if I'm not mistaken, is a little bit different, right? This is a huge leap forward for ARM-based Android phones. Well, they're all ARM-based, but for Android phones, year over year. But there's also the story about how at much lower wattage, you can do the same things as the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. So we have a bunch of stats now. They're Qualcomm stats, but they basically say that they can keep wattage much lower. They can keep power much lower and do the same things as the last year's chips at a lower power profile. So what is the bigger kind of story proliferating over there?
Yeah, I think that's it. It's funny. It's the keynote and the mobile deep dive really focused a lot on AI and the chip as a whole, right? So the switch to Orion was just a factor in several announcements. And the demos that they have here are almost solely focused on AI. Even the imaging demos are really focused on how AI will impact imaging. But then when I sat down in a roundtable discussion with Chris Patrick, who is we've had on the podcast a couple of times now, I think it became much more apparent that this chip's story, although maybe not as flashy as the AI elements are trying to be, is about performance and efficiency improvements, like on both sides of it, right? So he was asked for his elevator pitch for this chip, and it was laptop class performance with mobile class efficiency, which I think is like, I actually don't think they've pushed enough, assuming we're taking Qualcomm's word for it right now. We'll have to wait and see how this chip performs in like actual devices. But like the conversation that I had with him, and I wrote about it this week, kind of turned into like, well, okay, that's actually a much more interesting story than I think is being told here, because I would love to see what OEMs and developers can do with a chip that is both faster and, I guess, leaner, for lack of a better word for it, right? Like it, if it can do more, and they're saying that it can do a lot more, right? Chris Patrick's explanation was you won't have to think about tasks in terms of this is a laptop task versus this is something I can actually get done on my phone. Like he's like, you can do everything on your phone. Then I think we could be looking at like a more interesting world of devices, right? Like could we see newer form factors, or like old form factors that died out, old concepts that were not ready 10 years ago? My dream is like, and we talked about this in the conversation, but like I was like, go back 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, and like Asus had the pad phone where you slide your phone into a tablet, and it was like a neat idea that was like underbaked for the time. It just, the power wasn't there, it was finicky. But it's like maybe we're ready for something like that again, with Orion CPUs. Maybe it's time to bring back like your phone is everything and it just slides into different devices, or you dock it and it's your desktop PC now. So I think that's the story of this chip more than AI. But again, we'll have to wait and see what it's like when we're carrying a phone in our pockets that is running on this silicon.
I think that's funny, because when I think about what was keeping that form factor, the phone being the laptop in your pocket that can, expand into whatever, Michael Fisher's dream device, if you
I
will.
know this is just Fisher bait. It truly.
But or like the road warrior at the Starbucks who, has a portable monitor and is really into decks and has a keep. Like I've seen those people around, but I don't think
Is
the
this where I admit I
hardware.
used Dex on the plane on the way here? I used Dex mode on the Tab S10 Plus. Is that is
That's
that bad?
great. I mean, that's what Samsung wants, because it's true.
No.
But like, this is what we talked about, where is the goal here just to have a dual booting Android phone that has like basically the same processor, and you can run Android on it, you can run Windows 11 on it, and it doesn't really matter because now the architecture is the same.
The same, yeah.
Maybe it's not a slab phone, but maybe it's like a trifold, so
Right.
that when it's, you expand the phone into tablet mode like the Huawei Mate XT, and
Yeah.
you get the option to run Windows 11 natively on it. I don't think that's going to happen, and I think that that train is long gone, not because of the
No, yeah.
hardware, but because now it seems like purpose-built devices are far more part of the fabric of how we use technology than ever before, right? Apple has made this argument with the iPad. We were waiting for an M4, super thin M4 iPad that was essentially a laptop, because Apple would do something on the hardware, on the software side, to give it more of a Mac OS feel, right? That never happened. It probably will never happen. And we'll talk about this a bit later, but like, I was listening to Panos Panay talk to the Vergecast people, and I got really depressed for a second, because he's like, intentionality is back. We're releasing the Kindles to do one thing really, really well. There's a new Books Palma out, which is basically an Android phone with an e-ink screen that makes it really easy to like do whatever you want on this phone-like thing. Samsung just released a $1,500 tablet that is basically just the same tablet as you can get for $300 with a nicer display. The hardware is not the problem. It's the section.
Yeah.
It's like the kind of sectioning of our responsibilities, right? Like we want intentional devices because we want to feel like everything that we own has a purpose. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but it's just a thing that is not, I don't think it's ever going to come back as much as I may want it to.
So my piece was basically like, I have 3 predictions about how this could play out, and like they're not necessarily like, oh, only one of these can happen. I think first that desktop mode does catch on more than it would otherwise. Just the fact that there is more performance means that you're going to find people that are more willing to either launch something like Dex mode on their tablet, or like even just, you know, throw their PC into a dock, as we're saying, and like, or their smartphone into a dock and be like, you know what, like I actually can get enough work done on this that I don't need to worry enough. And like, granted, like it's going to depend on the workload. Although we were talking a lot about how like the power is there for companies like Adobe to bring like desktop class apps like Lightroom over to Android. It is just, again, it is dependent on developers. And that's really the, you know, I'm getting ahead of myself, but that is the problem with predicting stuff off a new chipset, is like the power might be there, the efficiency might be there, but it is up to developers and OEMs to make these things happen, right? The second thing I think is that like I think foldables are going to get a lot more impressive and powerful. And the conversations that you and I have been having, Daniel, about what are foldables good for and what are they not, I think those answers are going to start to be filled in just by the fact that these things are much more powerful. I think the larger displays you throw on them, the more they can do. Like if we start seeing more powerful apps arrive here, and it's like you can like truly just like edit a photo the way you would on a Windows PC, like on your Z Fold 7 or whatever, like I think that kind of gives an answer to a product category that has mostly just been like, it's the thing you like but bigger. And then yeah, the third is these all-in-one devices, which is a pipe dream, and like I'm aware of that, but like if we are going to try it again, that is like the path to, I think, a more exciting mobile ecosystem, I suppose, is what I would say. Like a period where we are actually kind of thrilled about new hardware again, rather than being like, the S25 has a slightly larger display and thinner bezels, and that's about it. You know, like that's the dream. So I am with you that I don't know if it'll happen, and like I that's in my piece, but like the path is there, and I'm happy that the path is there, and I'm begging OEMs and developers to follow it. It's just a matter of if they do, or if it's easier just to stay in an AI hype cycle and hope that people get excited over Galaxy AI.
I think if Apple had done it, everybody else would have done it. But Apple wants you to buy a phone, a tablet, and a laptop, and so does Samsung.
Well, that's the problem.
So
is that Google. I was talking to Michael Fisher about this, and that is the problem. Is that practically every major, you know, I guess OnePlus excluded, but like all of these companies make laptops that they do want to sell you. And I do think that is a roadblock in getting this device there. But I could see a company like Asus maybe trying this again, a company that is maybe a little more brave than current day Samsung. So we'll have to see.
I mean, Lenovo has put its money where its mouth is by, there is a product where it has a tablet and a Windows laptop all built in, right? So the tablet portion is Qualcomm powered, and then the base is Intel powered. So it's kind of 2 products in one. But I do see a version of that product which is powered by a version of the Orion SoC that everybody is going to buy next year, and it just has, you know, it'll like down clock when you're running a Windows or an Android laptop or Android tablet, and that makes sense to me, right? That is synergy, if you will. But again, my question is, nobody really wants that because Android tablets are terrible. And do people want the Atrix in 2024, which is just a $300 accessory where you plug in your phone into a dock and then it expands? That I don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But I think let's just talk briefly about the product itself, right? Because
right.
this is a very powerful chip, ostensibly competes well with Apple's A18 Pro SoC,
It's
as
on the
well as
same
the
fabrication as they're all TSMC 2nd gen 3rd nanometer chips, so like
right.
that they all should be pretty comparable. The MediaTek one is as well, so they all should be pretty comparable.
So what is Qualcomm saying is like the primary differentiator this year, both over the competition as well as over last year's flagship SoC?
I think it depends on who you talk to, but that is the question I essentially asked Chris Patrick, was if you had to pick one thing, what would you tell someone who has a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 powered phone? Like, what is the difference between that device and a device running this new chip? And it was that the power and efficiency is so much greater that you can accomplish things. And it's vague, right? But it's like you will not, that was the argument, was like, you will not have to think about like, oh, I need a full-fledged computer for this versus I can just use my phone, right? So like on an architectural level, it's a 2nd gen Orion CPU. The difference, and I think this is technical, but it's kind of easy to explain, is that like rather than using like off-the-shelf ARM Cortex cores, it is a custom built CPU coming from like the Nuvia acquisition that eliminates the 2 efficiency cores from last gen, replaces them with additional performance cores that they're saying are both faster and still able to clock down to the efficiency level of those older efficiency cores. It's a more powerful chip that just has more headroom and like a lower floor to be able to go up and down. And I feel like it's been a while since we've had a company be like, yeah, our chip is good because it's more powerful and more efficient, rather than our chip is good because of on-device LLMs or whatever. And like, granted, that depends on who you talk to. Lots of talk about on-device Gen AI and support for LLMs, but as I was telling you before we recorded, like a lot of the demos they showed this year for AI have not been particularly attention grabbing, I guess.
Well, it's all about doing more on device, right? So that raises the question of what are they going to empower on device that is not possible today. And Google has kind of undercut that whole idea mainly by putting a weaker CPU and GPU combination on an SoC with a very powerful NPU. And then whatever can't be done on device, it just throws up into the cloud, throws up meaning barfs up into the cloud. And you may have to wait a few seconds to a few minutes, depending on the activity. But this is something that I've asked, right? Like I've asked this of every single like manufacturer, every single company that makes chips, including Apple and MediaTek and Qualcomm. Like, what is the benefit of making more and more things on device? And they're always like, well, it's privacy, right? The fewer things we have to put in the cloud, the better for your privacy. And the second is obviously efficiency and battery life. And all of these things make sense. But until you can give us a compelling reason to use the things on the device, you're not actually telling me a story, right?
Right.
And I don't even think Google has done a good job differentiating what is on device versus what is not on device. And whether or not more and more things get put into this bucket of like on device processing,
right,
because it's a more powerful and more efficient product, I just think it's going to be meaningless until some app developer or even the operating system provider, Google or Apple, makes a compelling case for why you need all of this power and all of this RAM. And we're not there. We're just not there.
I don't know if we're going to be there. Like, the longer that goes on, that I have yet to see anyone of the thousands of companies rushing to make AI a thing people care about beyond just chatting with ChatGPT, none of you can come up with an answer for why this matters. And after a couple years of it, it starts to feel a little bit like Boy Who Cried Wolf, of like, there's got to be something one of you can come up with that wows me. And I don't, it's, I was downloading stuff onto my Pixel 9 Pro for the plane ride here. It's a very long plane ride. And my Pixel 9 Pro is the starter configuration, 128 gigabytes. And I disabled pixel screenshots because to use it, you have to download all of Nano's Gemini Nano's like the core things you need for that to run on device, and it's 5 GB. And I don't feel like I get for sacrificing a pretty large chunk of my phone's storage, because by the time you include Android and everything, it's about 100 GB of usable storage on that phone. And for all of the on-device hype that I get a lot out of keeping Gemini Nano on my phone for the sacrifice of 5 GB, when I can put a lot of songs on there or a couple movie downloads for 5 GB. And to me, like, the entertainment of watching Avatar: The Way of Water on the plane right here is a much greater boon to my mental health than being able to sort through screenshots slowly and add notes, I suppose, and see text that is in the image re-pasted into the description, which I guess helps somehow. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't mean to sound so like doomer about it, but I'm the longer it goes on, the more I'm like, you have to show your work, or I can't keep getting quote unquote excited about this, because I don't see what the benefit is just from what they're trying to show off at this moment. And not just Qualcomm. I mean, this is a tech industry problem. We are days away from Apple Intelligence finally launching to the public, and after a month and a half of incessant advertisements, if you watch any NFL game or any sports game, really, I think it's going to be pretty underwhelming for people with supported phones updating to iOS 18.1. And I'm just waiting for that answer and continuing to be like, I don't think it's coming. But I am curious if you disagree with that.
No, I don't. I don't disagree. Okay. I also just think like none of this solves the fundamental problem of the things that you can do on your phone don't take advantage of the power that your phone contains.
Well, and so that's a problem. That is, I think, the biggest hurdle facing the Snapdragon 8 Elite is that we need developers to step in and be like, no, I want to build like a truly powerful Android app that can take advantage of the headroom that this app or that this processor has. And we've talked a lot about the state of the Play Store and the state of Android app development on the show, and I don't know if it's going to happen. I want to believe it will, but like, Adobe still hasn't launched native ARM apps for the Snapdragon X Elite. Like, those are still emulated or using like a layer of emulation to run on the latest Surface laptop. And I as much as I want full Lightroom, like, that is the cynical side of me being like, Adobe's not going to bother, because why would they? I don't, so we'll see. But
yeah, I mean, I look, what's available on the Play Store all the time. There are no AAA titles that take advantage of ray tracing. Like, they bring up ray tracing every year, like it's something that developers are actually utilizing. The latest,
they're in China.
Okay,
if you love the Chinese gaming market or whatever, or that's really like, it was a quick conversation during the roundtable I went to, but it is just like the difference of North American mobile gamers versus mobile gamers in China or South Korea. It's just they play very different titles, and like Chris Patrick straight up was like, yeah, here it's mostly like Candy Crush. Like, you're not gonna apply ray tracing to Candy Crush. So
why not? Let's do it. Let's just
I agree.
Add. I think it'll make a big difference to the way that we do. And like, the most popular mobile game right now is Balatro. So
it sure is. Did you listen to me talk about it last week on the podcast?
I
that was my.
This is like a big deal. This is a big launch, and something that I've been waiting for since I got it on the Steam Deck a long time ago. But I also see on iOS there's Death Stranding. You can buy the full game. Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 2, like Assassin's Creed. Like, there are games that you can or will be able to play that are, for all intents and purposes, the equivalent of what you can get on a console. And that does not seem to be interesting to developers for Android, even though they now have the power to do so.
Right.
And I don't know, that's weird. It's just a weird thing to have a OnePlus and Asus and like all of these manufacturers touting gaming forward devices that can't play anything that takes advantage of the power. And I just, it feels like a huge miss on Google's part once again. So there's that. There's the AI conversation, which, as you said, is still very muddled. There's the, is this even a big deal from like will this just fundamentally improve my battery life too? Like, there are a bunch of phones that I cannot talk about yet, but let's just say most phones being released in 2025 from the big players are touting bigger batteries. That is a major talking point for every single company that will release an Android phone next year. And I'm curious about that because if this product is so efficient, why is it that they're focusing on including bigger batteries? I'm not convinced that this is actually going to be a meaningfully more efficient product.
I straight up wrote that in my, I want to say the news post, is that I have an eyebrow raised towards the lack of efficiency cores just because I need to see how that chip performs. Like I need to, this is really the first time since I guess maybe the 8 Gen 1, but like maybe even older than that there has been such a major shift in how the chip is performing. And I think it's a good question. And like, you should, if you are interested in a device running, a future device running a Snapdragon 8 Elite, I would say like wait till, and it won't take long, right? Like over the next 3 months, it's October 23rd as we record this. Over the next, fast forward 3 months, it'll be January 23rd. The S25 will almost certainly be announced by then. We might have I don't know when they're going to launch that, but they launched pretty early in January last year, so we might have a review done by then, and we'll have a better idea of how this chip is performing. But until then, yeah, I am curious to see if it makes a difference.
Just based on early benchmarks from GeekerOne, which is a Chinese channel that takes a look at all the products. I think the OnePlus 13 is what was announced for China. They got a unit. It looks like it is more efficient, that it doesn't throttle as quickly in high performance loads than
that's what they're saying. And that you wouldn't even need like vapor chamber improvements to cool the chip. It is so good at throttling up and down depending on the task that is why they eliminated the efficiency cores, because the performance cores can just do what the efficiency cores were doing without having to push the process to a different core.
But that's different than like total longevity.
Yes, it depends on like even just in standby mode, like what is the phone doing? Like is it able to throttle down enough to just chill there? Without so it's a serious question, but like I don't think benchmarks are good at answering those questions. I think that is a conversation that will have to be had when devices are being used as daily drivers.
Other than that, I mean, there's not a ton to talk about yet. We don't have any devices with the Snapdragon 8 Elite in it. We will have to wait until probably late this year, early next year for the first products to launch. Samsung would likely be the first, if not OnePlus.
Yeah, TM Rowe was on stage this week, but did not say much over his 5-minute speech. It was mostly his usual collection of buzzword AI buzzwords.
And if ARM has its way, this will be the last set of Orion cores that Qualcomm ever releases. So while this is all happening, and it's no coincidence that it's coinciding with Qualcomm's big announcement, ARM announced yesterday that it's pulling its custom instruction set license from Qualcomm, which means that unless this is resolved, Qualcomm will not be allowed to create custom Orion cores anymore.
Yes, this would affect this like an injunction would probably prevent like phones like the S25 from being sold, because the chip wouldn't be licensed properly. So I don't want to get too far ahead. Like this is a serious problem for Qualcomm, but this is the result of these two companies who have been feuding since 2022 when that buyout fell through. My guess is that this is a get your checkbook out Qualcomm type of situation.
Right.
Like this is ARM being like, when the news broke, it was pretty late in the day here, so it was very late in the day Eastern time, but it was I heard a few people, there were journalists being like, what does this mean for the chip? And I'm like, it means that this is ARM being like, congratulations on your launch, you're going to write us a big check to make this chip. Like they will settle, and even if the 6 week, it's 6 weeks, I believe, right? They have 6 weeks to rectify this. Yeah. Even if that goes into effect, I don't think it goes far beyond a few days after that expires. So
yeah, I would say this is just an increase in pressure on Qualcomm to settle the lawsuit and to pay up, because it believes that it doesn't need to license separately because it has existing licenses through
Nuvia
and or Nuvia, and Qualcomm disagrees with that. So
yeah,
this is basically just like Arm complaining that like Qualcomm has been paying Verizon $35 a month for the last 15 years because they have some like crazy grandfathered plan, and Verizon's basically saying you can't do it anymore, we're cutting you off, and Qualcomm's being like, but my grandfather. All right, that's it. So we'll talk about this a lot more once the phones are available. Let's talk quickly about Samsung. So Samsung had a busy week. It launched a special edition of the Galaxy Z Fold 6 in South Korea, which is basically the Fold 6 that everybody wanted, but nobody can buy. What do you think is going on here? Why didn't Samsung just release this as the Z Fold 6 around the world?
I don't know. I the only thing I can think of is that maybe they have internal metrics that the S Pen is that, because this does not support the S Pen, correct? That was the rumor for the longest time. I believe that was confirmed. My guess is that like it well, but maybe they have internal metrics that Z Fold 6 or Z Fold users in general actually do care about the S Pen. Otherwise, I don't know why this isn't the device they launched, because I think even without the S Pen, I think if they launch this, their reviews of the Z Fold, if this is the normal Z Fold 6, I think you have a lot more positive press going into the holiday season of people being like, yeah, big jump for the Z Fold series. Congratulations on catching up to the competition and in exceeding them, or at the very least, like, 10.6 millimeters when folded, that's caught up to Google. It's ahead of OnePlus, although they haven't launched a phone, a foldable in a year. But yeah, I don't get it. Like, I wish I could come here and be like, using my, the things I know about the industry, but it's like, no, I truly do not understand. I guess the other thing would be if they can't manufacture enough of this device, or maybe it's such a new design for them, just the thinner chassis, that they're worried about rigidity and they want to essentially test run it in a couple markets before the Z Fold 7 kind of takes this design. Those are my two guesses, and I don't think either of them are particularly good reasons to split this launch.
I mean, I suspect you're right. I think Samsung has to probably figure out whether long-term durability for a thinner foldable will impact its repair rates and its return rates and things like that. Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, it's weird to me that like, here's a company like acknowledging that a bigger, wider, slightly more expensive foldable makes sense. Yeah. But the fact that they're only releasing it in South Korea means that the yields on these are probably quite low right now, because like at the very least they would have released this in the US if they could make more of them, I suspect.
It's similar to the first gen Pixel Fold, where it was like extremely limited, but like the US was one of the regions. Yeah.
Even if they could only make a few million or a few 100,000 of them and sell it for $300-$400 more, they would probably sell out, because I think that there are enough Fold 3, Fold 4 owners that are still holding on to their devices
waiting for a change.
I don't see the 6 being as big of an upgrade as I want, but this to me is the upgrade, right? This is, I don't care about the S Pen. I suspect most people don't. They want a bigger, wider tablet that's also a great phone. And this is it. Like, I've been using the Z Fold 6 as my daily driver for the last 2 weeks. I've brought it everywhere. It's better than the Z Fold 4 that I used to use in terms of the front display is wide enough that I can type on it relatively comfortably, but it's not even close to the experience of a Pixel Fold or a OnePlus Open. And I don't think I'm going to use it long term, despite the improvements to the software. So yeah, this to me just feels like the right move.
I do have a hard time being like, yeah, I understand why Samsung is having trouble like nailing this thinner design, and they're so worried about it when it's like 10.6 millimeters is relatively thin for a foldable, but like lots of Samsung's rivals, specifically from China, have bested this, right? And then like the Pixel 9 Pro Fold is 10.5 millimeters, and that had a pretty large like regional launch. Yeah. And Samsung should be the expert here, and so whether they're playing it safe or they don't feel like their process is good enough yet, like either way, I think it's a bit of a fail, and a weirdly sour note for 2024, which I think was like largely a bad year for Samsung. Like
yes.
Now that it is, as we approach the end of the year, I think it is safe to say.
Yeah, agreed. So that's happening, but I also think like there's a bunch of rumors around Samsung foldables. They may launch a trifold device next year. I think that's almost a certainty. So,
but also it's like they're so scared about making a thinner Z Fold, and yet they're like, don't worry though, we're gonna launch a trifold, like we're good to go. Like that's what doesn't make sense to me. Like
I think because Huawei did it, Samsung has to do it.
Are they only going to launch it in South Korea is my question. Do you know what I mean? Like, is this another thing where it's the Z Fold 7 special edition in October, and it's in South Korea, and it costs the equivalent of $4,000 US, and they've made 20 of them.
Here's my prediction. Okay, I'm gonna put this out into the world and see what happens. There will be
someone write this down.
There will be 3 foldables next year. There will be the Z Fold 7, the Z Fold 7 Special Edition, and the Z Fold 7 Triple, or whatever it's called.
Triple Edition.
And I think the Z Fold 7 will just be like the regular one that will be $18.99 and just like have very minor updates, and that will be that. I think the Z Fold 7 Special Edition will be $300 more, and it will be essentially the bigger version, the Z Fold Special Edition, but launched worldwide. And then there will be the trifold, which will be like $2,999, and it will be only available in China and 3 other markets. Let's say like South Korea, China, and Australia. No, it won't be available in Australia. And then that will be that. And I agree. That will just that'll be, and that'll kind of like get their R&D juices flowing again. And maybe in a couple of years they will release the Z Fold Triple all over the world. But I just don't see Samsung abandoning the form factor of the Z Fold 6 anytime soon.
No, I think it has to be a trifold would be a completely different product. It wouldn't be like, here is the new Z Fold 7 or Z Fold 8 if we end up being 2 years off. It's a trifold now. It's like, no, like there's the standard foldable, and then you pay $1 billion and you get the trifold or whatever. Yeah, I agree.
Right. Yeah, we'll see. Other than that, I just wanted to talk very, very quickly about the new Kindles and all of the e-ink devices that are coming out. So I know you and James talked about the new Kindles last week. I'm very excited. I'm going to get the Paperwhite Signature Edition, primarily because I have been extremely disappointed in the Kobo Clara Color. I don't like the screen on that thing. I think the color e-ink is not there yet, and I don't think people should get it yet until the contrast ratio has improved. I think the Color Soft is going to have the same problem, maybe less so because Amazon's done a bunch of things to make it a bit higher contrast, and the refresh rate is slightly better. But in general, I still think black and white is the way to go for most people, and the Paperwhite just feels like a huge upgrade in terms of speed. And that to me is like, I still use a Kindle Oasis. Like I love that thing, but I'm ready to move on. Like that thing is micro USB powered. The battery doesn't last very long anymore. I'm ready. My body's ready. But I also think I'm going to get
boat. The micro USB thing is a problem. Like it's like the only gadget in our house that is still like regularly charged through micro USB.
Yeah, it's not great. It's really the only. You're right. It's the only one that is powered by micro USB, and it sucks. So even though the battery lasts for a month still, it's so inconvenient every time I want to charge it that I just don't. So I'll get that, but I'm also really curious about the Palma 2. So that's $280. It's got a faster processor, a newer version of Android. It's running Android 13. I think that's really all it is, right? It's just a slight spec bump, same display, same amount of RAM and storage, but you'll get a better experience running Android 13 with a faster processor. And this cute little 6-inch phone PDA thing, I'm here for it. I want to try it. So I'm glad I didn't buy the Palma when I had thought about it. So now I can actually waste my money on a newer gadget.
Get Balatro running on that.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go.
Do you know Balatro is like 170 megabytes on Android? I was going through the amount of apps that are larger than Balatro. It's like every shopping app, Target. It just the amount of apps that like have not fit. You know, like Uber was like 500 megabytes, and I'm like, none of you need to be larger than Balatro. Is all I'm saying. There's so many jokers in that game, and they've got them down to, kilobytes. Let's figure it out.
I'm very impressed with this game. I love it on mobile.
It feels. I didn't like it on my Steam Deck. I needed a touchscreen. It's like it feels so much better dragging the cards around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think we'll end there.
Sure.
I wish you all of the best for your remaining day or so. When do you leave?
Saturday. We'll fly home Saturday afternoon and get home Sunday morning because of the time difference. But we got to real quick. We got to do what's making you happy this week, Daniel.
Well, Balatro is making me happy, so I don't know.
Okay, it is Balatro for you.
Last week, about that.
Balatro for me. This week, Balatro for you. Yeah.
What about you? What's making you happy?
It's this. Do you see this behind me?
Yeah, I figured that would be your answer.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ride a water slide. I think that's the plan for me. As I'm gonna go walk up a couple flights of stairs and then go down a water slide and then do it all over again for an hour or so.
I hate you.
But think about, like, it takes so many hours to get here. So that's the punishment. You should actually feel bad for me.
Mm-hmm. No, I do. I feel sorry. I feel sorry for you, to be honest.
Oh my god. Yeah, no, it's we Maddie and I extended the trip a little bit because they moved it used to be Monday to Thursday and now it's Sunday to Wednesday, and so it's actually possible to stay a little bit later without having to like take additional time off the week after. So it's good. It should be a fun time.
All right, well, enjoy it, and we'll be back in the real world next week.
Yeah, Toronto, the real world.
Toronto, the real world. Toronto and Buffalo, the only two cities in the world.
That's true. Different sides of the same lake.
All right, if you have any feedback, let us know. podcast@androidpolice.com. And let us know what you're doing, what you're playing, what you're reading, what you're watching, what you're listening to this week. I'm excited because there is a new Father John Misty album coming out very soon. And
there is also a new Tyler, the Creator album that I'm excited about. So that's
coming out next Friday.
Monday. No, Monday.
Next Monday. Yeah, that's a weird day
the
for
28th
release.
Yeah, it is weird. He put a single out. I have not actually had time to listen to it yet.
I've heard it.
Is
it
good?
It's very good. It's very good.
Okay.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Maybe I'll see him live this time. I had tickets to his last tour, and the Pittsburgh show that we were going to got canceled like a week before. So maybe we'll get to. Actually, he's coming to Toronto next year.
Yes,
so maybe I'll be there.
Well, we'll have to do a pod right in the middle of the dance
middle
floor
of the Tyler the Creator
concert.
So we're like let's see, it'll be the summer. We'll be talking about the Z Fold 7. We'll be like, it's the trifold. It's so good. Anyway,
we'll try to get Tyler the Creator to give us his feedback on Android phones.
He would love that.
I think he actually would. All right, it. That's it for the show. Thank you for listening as always, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.